that brings us to the scenario of Bayern Munich would do beat Hertha. And for about 65 to 70 minutes, it looked like my prediction that they would draw this game would come true because, like Dortmund, they huffed and puffed. They could not find a way to get through this Hertha block. Hertha looked actually pretty well organized while not really offering much in attack. Yeah, there was a few times when Luki Bacchio did get forward, but they never really, it never felt like that Hertha would do something. Essentially, a moment of magic by Kimmich and Gnabry win this game. Koeman then scores the second, but Kimmich and Gnabry did what Dortmund didn't do against Bochum, and that was essentially one pass, one contact, goal, right? They used that one moment when Hertha's defense was asleep to score what turned out to be the winner. That's great for Bayern. They're back on top. I think everyone here is cautioned by the fact that this is Hertha, who, with another 20 minutes of this, could have gotten to a point there. And I think in the end of the day, if this match ends 0-0, I don't think many people would have been surprised, right? And that is, I think, where Dortmund fans can be really optimistic in the run-in. And it also gets us to the point that if Bayern drop points one more time, we'll have the worst Bundesliga champion since the 2010-2011 season in terms of points total, which is just remarkable. And I think completely underlines all the things that we just said about Dortmund, which are also true about Bayern Munich, that this is literally a snail's race to the title. In fact, Union Berlin, if they had won their game against Leverkusen, would be within 3 points of first, which is also insane. No one wants to win this title, it looks like, including Bayern Munich.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of tweeted that on Sunday, I think it was, saying 3 reasons why I want Union Berlin to win the title. And one of the points was that because Bayern and Dortmund don't deserve to win it. And that is kind of the conclusion I'm coming to this season, largely based on the fact that you can look at both teams and say, well, regardless whoever wins it, they're going to have to spend the summer doing a lot of work to rebuild either team or both teams to make them match fit and fighting fit for the next season. But yeah, I mean, I think it goes some way to kind of showing just how much Dortmund or how much Bayern have kind of fallen from grace, in the sense that what was a pretty routine 2-0 win over Hertha Berlin was kind of seen as like a relief, to finally pick up 3 points. And I think I tweeted at halftime that Bayern really did bombard that Hertha goal. Hertha did a great job of defending at points, and I thought they didn't look entirely uncomfortable for most of the Bayern pressure. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we were talking about this at halftime, and I was during the game, and I was like, no, Bayern are going to win this. Like, there's no way they don't beat this Hertha team. I mean, it really would have been quite something. But, before the game, when we saw Choupo-Moting was out, I think it's going to be ruled out on Saturday. Yeah. But that was a big deal because, they huffed and puffed in that first half. And my conclusion was at halftime that Bayern are kind of going through the motions, but they just don't have anyone to kind of put the ball in the back of the net. And thought it was quite telling that the way Serge Gnabry finally scored that goal was through a header, which finally got into that kind of role of a kind of striker, finally into that role as a number 9 and finished like a number 9. And suddenly Bayern get that breakthrough. But I do kind of want to spend a moment on Joshua Kimmich here, because for the last 2 or 3 weeks, maybe longer, we've been kind of slowly but surely underlining the performances that him and Goretzka have been putting in. And while I don't think either of them have really had stinkers recently, I don't think either player would really make an argument or would be willing to make the argument that they've had classic seasons.
Yeah.
And, I know Kimmich isn't really renowned as a kind of playmaker, but I thought it was quite telling that he's got 2 assists in this game, and they were actually his first assist in the league since February, I think. And when you do kind of partner that up with Leon Goretzka, who really should be a kind of box-to-box player who picks up about 10 or 15 goals and assists every season, it feels like while Bayern's glaring fault in this team is they don't have a striker, there are kind of issues across the pitch. And in the middle of the park, both Kimmich and Goretzka have kind of been below par. Kimmich looked back to his best somewhat in this game, but Another interesting thing I thought was also Goretzka after the game basically came out and said, the players have had to put up with a lot of criticism this season, and I
Yeah.
don't think it's fair. Which I actually think I've noticed a lot of Bayern fans took quite a lot of exception to that because you know, the players haven't been good, and you can blame Nagelsmann or you can now blame Tuchel. But at the end of the day, like if you keep changing the manager and nothing changes, then it's obviously the players. And I don't know, maybe that was just frustration on his part. 'Cause I think he probably knows in his own heart that he hasn't had a great season.
Mm.
But I don't know. I thought it was quite telling that once one of them finally stepped up and looked like their old self, they were able to win this game. And I think that's maybe something that's been missing this season.
Yeah, I think Kimmich's magic foot, right? Zauberfuß was the headline in the Süddeutsche Zeitung, decides this game, and that is something that has been missing. The chip ball that he's so capable of playing into the box, right? And it was a magnificent moment. Like that pass was a spot point delivery, and does make the difference in this game. Now, I don't think that Bayern Munich are out of the woods at all. In fact, their run-in is quite difficult. They still got Werder, they got Schalke, they got Leipzig, and then Köln, right? And I think that three of those four teams are potential stumbling blocks. And I know we have a lot of Köln listeners. It's not Köln. I think Schalke is probably, people will look at Werder and Schalke and say, okay, well, they're not really that difficult. But Schalke in particular could be a team here that might say, hey, we need points here for survival. This is not like, oh, nice to have. Like, this is like when you look at the relegation race, they are actually in a situation where they probably need at least a point against Bayern Munich to have a chance of staying in the league. And I think they're actually capable of doing it, right? This is the other thing. They are the team that could probably hurt them. Now, I don't know what's going on with Werder Bremen and Niklas Füllkrug, but I do think if Niklas Füllkrug is back, then that is a goal for Bremen right there, right? So, and the amount of goals that Bayern have been scoring lately, that might be enough to get a point. So, I think there is a run in there where Bayern Munich they have work to do to actually win this title. It is not a given that they win all four games. I guess the bigger question then is, can Dortmund win all of their four games? Having 3 home games is massive versus 2, right? But at the end of the day, I think, this is still very much open on this Bayern team, despite the expected win against Hertha. I think they're not quite over the hump yet.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, like I said, it was just a routine 2-0 win over Hertha. This was probably the easiest fixture that Bayern could have had this weekend. Yeah. With all the respect to Hertha Berlin, I'm not trying to kind of rain on their parade. Well, not that they're having a parade, I guess, but kick the Moiler down is probably the best idiom I could use for that. But yeah, I don't know. I felt like this felt like a bit of a leg up for Bayern, and they will have tougher tests to come. I think it'd be really interesting to see how Tuchel kind of takes the next couple of games, because obviously the kind of main thing was the fact that Upamecano was missing from this game with an injury. So Pavard comes into mid defense alongside De Ligt, with Mazraoui and then Cancelo, and I thought that actually worked quite well, to be honest with you. So it'll be interesting. And then obviously, you got issues with Sadio Mane up front, which didn't quite work out. I don't know. This Bayern team really just feels like it's almost like a pre-season tour where like they're playing different players every week. Some are working, some aren't. Tuchel's still trying to kind of figure out what players he can rely on. But he's having to do this all in the trickiest of situations. And I guess to kind of bring it back to like this kind of, I don't want to call it an underwhelming title race, because I'm still really enjoying it and it's very entertaining and it gives us stuff to talk about. I really hope people listen to this are enjoying the show as well and enjoying the season. But it's such a benefit to Bayern that they can rely on Dortmund dropping points in just about every away game they seem to be playing right now. Now, Dortmund only have one more away game coming up, so they've got 3 home games and then 1 away game. I can't actually remember who that away game against, but I don't remember. Yeah, I'd say it doesn't seem like a difficult one, but obviously Augsburg picked up a point this weekend, so you never really know. But it'll be really interesting to see how Bayern do kind of get on going forward. And I mean, I guess Choupo-Moting coming back at some point make a big difference because they desperately missed him. But so just one more thing, actually, maybe like it just kind of popped into my head here. Serge Gnabry gets his goal, playing almost like a kind of number 9. And I do think it's really interesting to see what happens for him in between now and the end of the season as well, because he, I think, more than just about any forward player in this team, perhaps even more so than Sadio Mane, has a lot of question marks over his future, I think, because while Leroy Sané seems to kind of be a kind of ingrained kind of star player in this team, at least in terms of like as a leader, or maybe not a leader, but as a kind of a senior member of the squad in terms of his pay pack. Kingsley Coman has a very clear role in this team because he's the right winger, or he can sometimes play on the left, but he's a winger through and through, and he'll do what he's asked to do as a winger. If you don't have a number 9 in the box, that's not his problem. He's going to do what a winger's supposed to do, and it's up to the club to find another player to fit in there. And Sadio Mane is a player who I think has a lot of talent. He's got a lot of pedigree, and I'd be really intrigued to see if Tuchel actually maybe can kind of rebuild something there between now and the summer. But he is undoubtedly kind of a player who would play up front if the club's stuck with him. Serge Gnabry just kind of seems to float in between all these roles. He was kind of started as almost like a number 10 in this game, but with Musiala in the squad, they kind of played over one another. And I don't know, I just wonder where Serge Gnabry kind of fits into this team going forward, or if at all. And, when the season finishes up, and regardless of whether Bayern finished first or second, you're going to have Oliver Kahn, Salihamidzic, Thomas Tuchel, whoever else, with a whiteboard and a list of names on one side of the board, and, a list of positions, like we have on Transfermarkt, where you can kind of rank the squad by positions. And Serge Gnabry doesn't really nail down any of those positions. He just kind of floats between them all. And I do wonder if, when Bayern are looking at what's going wrong in the squad, players like that may be the first ones to go, in the sense that they don't really hold a specific role in the team, except sometimes playing up front and sometimes scoring the odd goal.
Yeah, Serge Gnabry's future, I think, is going to be really interesting. Because, like, as you said, like, he doesn't really fit that number 9 role. I mean, we discussed Bayern Munich's future number 9, I think, in great length on this show, on various shows. So it's going to be interesting to see what his future holds and whether he's going to still be at the club. I mean, you mentioned Oliver Kahn, Hasan Salihamidzic. We're not sure if they're still at the club when the dust settles. Oliver Kahn, I was kind of shocked by this when I saw the video. He looked like he's aged 10 years since I've seen it last in February. Which tells you the pressure that he's under, I think, at the club at the moment. I actually was really shocked by it. Like how there's these photos of Barack Obama after his first year in office as a president, and how aged he looked after that first year. I was shocked how aged Oliver Kahn looked. And I think it tells you quite a bit of how much is going on behind closed doors.
Yeah. Can I also just make a final point before we move on to our game? And this is such a stupid thing to pick up on in a football match, but because it's Bayern Munich, it's probably quite necessary. We always talk about how, like, at least over the last 4 or 5 weeks, every time a team scores against Bayern Munich, the camera cuts to Salihamidzic and Oliver Kahn sitting next to each other, one of them with his head in his hands, the other one kind of looking dismayed. This week for this game, I thought was quite telling is that Kahn and Salihamidzic weren't sitting next to each other at all. In fact, I'm not even sure if they had Salihamidzic in the crowd. Maybe he did, but Kahn was sitting on his own.
He was sitting with Heiner.
Right, so Heiner and Salihamidzic are sitting together. Kahn is sitting on his own, but who did the camera cut to time and time again? Uli Hoeneß and Rummenigge, both sitting beside each other. And they were kind of sitting almost in the exact same spot that Salihamidzic and Kahn usually sit in. And it's almost like subconsciously the kind of cameramen at the Bundesliga were just kind of cutting to these two old kind of guys who used to do the job, rather than Salihamidzic and Kahn, who had quite literally been pushed to the sides in the stand. And I thought that's just so interesting, like psychologically, the fact that these two guys have been sitting next to each other. Now they're not sitting next to each other, and the old guard have been placed front and centre. But I'm sure Bayern do these things on purpose. I'm absolutely certain of it.
Yeah.
But it says a lot about how things are going on at the club behind closed doors right now.
Well, that's what I said like last week. It's like Kremlinology, right? Where like the Soviet leaders were placed in certain positions so the West could figure out where their hierarchy status is. And I think that's what's going on at Bayern Munich. So I guess this is Selbener Straße-lology, where we like try to figure out on where they're sitting in the stand, on what their current status in the hierarchy is. Based on that, it's not looking good for Oliver Kahn. But we have I think there's lots more to discuss about this later this week when we have more information. I do want to stay with Hertha